Hey, this is Kurt, the Bariatric Carnivore, and it is a great day. I am truly excited about this announcement that just came out from our Health and Human Services Secretary Kennedy, who has announced that he is working with medical schools to finally implement nutritional education as part of the medical school curriculum. And you may be surprised at the fact that, you've probably talked to your doctor and they've asked you about their diet, but fewer than a quarter of them have ever received any classes in nutrition at all. And most of those classes from the doctors that I've talked to really boil down to, intravenous feeding of people that are like on life support and stuff like that. Very few of them talk about what a healthy diet is. And, so it is not something that has been emphasized in medical school. And this is truly kind of surprising when you think about it, because according to some estimates from like the University of Washington, 60% of chronic diseases could be cured through a good diet. Let that sink in. We are spending billions, hundreds of billions of dollars for the treatment of chronic diseases, particularly type 2 diabetes and everything that comes from that. I mean, when you've got type 2 diabetes, your risk of heart disease goes up dramatically, amputations, there's a whole host of problems that come with type 2 diabetes, and it is completely solvable through a good diet. A whole foods diet, getting rid of the ultra-processed foods would solve it. But our doctors, frankly, don't have the knowledge to handle that. And we're talking about, a disease pattern that affects 60% of Americans. 60% of this country has some sort of chronic disease. Of that, nearly half could be solved, taken care of, taken out of the medical system. No longer would we have to pay for prescriptions and continuous office visits for nearly half the 60% of people that have chronic diseases, if somebody would tell them about diet. But the medical system doesn't push it because they don't train doctors in it. And if you're going to your doctor for nutritional advice, you're going to the wrong place because they just haven't had the training in it. And this is a paradigm shift. This is a major change. And it shouldn't be. I mean, you think about, the father of medicine, Hippocrates, said, look, let food be thy medicine. And, before we had all these pharmaceuticals, that's what most people did. And frankly, in most of, U.S. history, doctors knew their patients. And they had a very holistic approach, and oftentimes they were utilizing food and herbs and other stuff to take care. The things that we would consider folk remedies were pretty common for most doctors until the beginning of the 20th century. There was a thing called the Fleckner Report, and Fleckner was not a doctor, but he was a guy that was basically hired by John D. Rockefeller to help standardize the way we train doctors. I mean, until the beginning of the 20th century, medical education was kind of haphazard, and there were different medical schools with different approaches, and he wanted to standardize it and got state regulatory boards to start certifying doctors and licensing them. And most of that was because Rockefeller wanted to create a way of marketing his pharmaceutical products, most of which were petroleum based. And frankly, there was a lot of money on the line. He was buying up a lot of pharmaceutical companies, and he needed doctors to really be pushing his products in order for him to make money. And it has had a really negative effect on health. There's a lot of, there's quite a few positives, but one of the unfortunate side effects of the Fleckner Report was getting rid of a lot of alternative views on health, and he created basically a silo system where, you have all these different specialties dealing with different parts of the body, but nobody really looking after the totality and nobody looking after health. everything was a disease and everything had to have a pill to go along with it. And that's where we are. And nobody in this system, when you think about it, from the insurance companies to the government to the medical schools to the medical establishment, nobody's talking about health. They're always talking about different diseases. And as a result, we are getting unhealthier by the day, and we're just not looking after the root causes and things that are so preventable through diet and lifestyle. So hopefully this is the beginning of a new era. It's going to be an uphill fight. It's going to take time for these doctors that go through these medical schools to get really good nutritional education, and there's going to be pushback as to really what makes up a good diet. And it's not an easy fight, but for the first time somebody has brought it up and is finally discussing it with some gravitas. And this could really help begin to change the discussion. This is Kirk, the Bariatric Carnivore, and I'm kind of celebrating Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s announcement that we're finally going to start changing medical schools and hopefully start training doctors in nutrition, where doctors can give good advice and solve maybe 60% of the chronic disease crisis in this country. Hopefully while there's still time, before it costs us trillions of dollars. And that's really what we're looking at with the costs of just the treatment of type 2 diabetes down the road. $1 trillion a year to treat a disease that's utterly preventable with good lifestyle. So this is Kirk, the Bariatric Carnivore. I try to put out a couple messages each week. If you like this message, please hit like and subscribe. Join this channel of other like-minded folks. I will talk to you again soon.